meeting of Grand Forks City Council to order. This is a special council meeting, and the first item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Like I said, I'd like to add a question period that's not on the written agenda at this point, but restricted to the question of the finances that are in front of us today. Motion, Councillor Kendall, Councillor Doherty, all those in favor. And bringing us down immediately to Bylaw 1997, and are we presenting it? Are you going to say anything to us?
I can.
Sure.
I'll do a little summary of the,
Sure,
the three options.
just a little bit of an explanation for council there before we open up the questions.
Right.
PowerPoint thing?
I think she's going to take it over to the three options. Can you do that for me, Diane?
Yeah.
Can you put the three options on?
You bet I can.
Thanks. So we did an introduction of the tax rates bylaw at the previous meeting, and we were given three options for council. The first option.
The previous slide. Page 7. Yeah.
There we go. So we showed the 2013 actual, the three options. The first option would be to increase the average taxes by 2% with the same conversion ratios, meaning that the same proportion of the total tax would be paid by each of the classes.
Yeah.
The option 2 would increase the average revenues by 2%, but it would slightly lower the major industry class 4. And option 3 would be the same tax rates as last year. And we discussed that option 3, because the total assessments in the city did go down this year, option 3 would see a revenue shortfall for our financial plan this year if we were to go with the same tax rates as last year. So I recommended option 2, and there had been discussion afterwards regarding option.
All right, that's the biggest question in front of us at this point, right?
Is which option to pick.
Council, do you want to put it on the table with the motion and then conduct a discussion? Councillor Doherty, Councillor Smith, doesn't second it. Can we have a seconder on the motion? Councillor Wyers seconds, and so it's on the floor and discussion. We're being recommended to accept formula number 2. The basic budget that we've gone over the 5-year plan is pretty much something that we've had a kick at for a month or more. But the question is how we distribute the cost over those categories that we are in charge of. Questions? Comments?
So specifically the...
Councillor Smith.
Sorry. So the specific motion is to accept option 2? Or is it to just...
I see it as accepting option 2 and the acceptance of the 5-year plan with option 2.
I prefer option 1. I think industry is doing well, and why not just spread it evenly across the board?
Okay, and again, comparing 1 and 2, can you remind us what the major difference was there between 1 and 2?
The major difference in 1 and 2, option 1 would see the same distribution of taxes as 2013. So the difference between option 1 and 2, option 2 major industry would pay approximately $33,000 total less than the average of last year.
Right.
So it's transferring a bit of that burden to the other classes.
Okay, that's clear, thank you. And Councillor Rishagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too can support option 2. I have issues with moving the tax burden from the industrial class to the residential class and commercial class, in as much as Councillor Kendall pointed out, the forestry industry, for instance, is cyclical. It has booms, it has bust cycles, and it currently is in a boom cycle where I think they could afford to pay a little bit more, or not necessarily pay more, but pay what they have been paying before. When it comes to incorporated companies, industry, they can write off their taxes. If we push that burden onto a residential property, they can write it off, they have to pay it. That conversion factor is 2% plus the difference is what it's going to work out to be.
Right.
Further, we've helped out industry a lot in the past, especially during those bus cycles, Mr. Mayor, when they did their upgrades on the mill. And we might still, in fact, have, I'm not exactly sure, the tax exemption bylaw on their improvements. Are they still currently on that?
2014 is the last year of the exemption,
So-
and they're receiving a 20% exemption.
Yeah, so they currently already having a 20% exemption off their taxes right now, currently. And now we're going to help them out even further and push that burden onto the residential taxpayer. I just can't accept that.
Further comment?
I concur with Councillor Smith and Councillor Rorschach, and I think, the city has always stepped up and been a good corporate citizen, if you want to put it that way, to help industry when times are tough. And I don't see this as a huge burden. I just think that it's appropriate when times are good that everyone shares in, the any added cost. So I would support option number 1 and option number 2.
It looks like this motion is in trouble, and Councillor O'Doherty, did you wish to hold the motion for a vote? Or seconder is Councillor Wires?
Well, you want to move forward? Okay, we'll have a move on.
Okay, ready for the question? Councillor Krog hasn't had a chance to speak to this. Do you wish to address us, Councillor Krog?
No, I'm going to save it as a surprise for final reading. Just out of fun. No, I agree with the conversations that have been said,
Right.
so I would just be repeating myself.
All right, thank you very much. That's very delicately put. And so the question on the motion, the recommendation is number 2, which would distribute about $33,000 from industry, from major industry to 2 other classes, residential and commercial, or light industry.
All of the other classes, residential is
Right.
the one that takes most of it, being that they're paying most of the taxes.
Percentage
as
of it
is.
anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Okay, motion is defeated. Can we put another motion on the floor? Councillor
So
Smith.
moved. Option 1.
Option 1. And seconder for that? Councillor Kendall. And can I ask again the implications of a choice of number 1, just again to remind people?
Option 1 sees the actual rate per thousand of assessed value increase slightly from last year. Major industry rate last year was 42.4043, and option 1 would bring it up to 43.3948, so it would bring it up slightly.
Right, and we are already on the upper end of that industry scale.
I actually have a list of all of the NBC, what all the major industry rates are. 43 is by far not the highest. It is higher, it's above 40, and 40 is usually about the average mark to shoot at to attract if we were looking to attract any kind of new industry.
So we are on the high end of it. With that, I would remind people too that this building and the cooperation we had from major industry here, from Roxall, has put us in the position where we've been able to continue our functions. Councillor Wires.
Well, the reason for my decision was because in my first term, we had been working towards leveling that, balancing that
Yes.
burden out more. And so that's my strongest position here is that continual until we reach a level where we're happy with it. I don't see where everybody's really in the economic crisis around this world has actually disappeared, shall we say. I think it's still a very fragile economy, and I just feel very strongly that if we can provide this second year or third year that it might be our 4th year that we've worked on this, of that leveling of the balance of the tax burden to our industrial. And that's commercial as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just
No,
industry.
Class 6 is considered the commercial business.
Councillor Doherty.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Wire. Number 1, the problem I got is taxes go up there or stay the same. The companies are having a hard time. It doesn't matter what's happening now. And when we go from number 2 to number 1, I'm scared, worried that the company use that as a leader, and we have to think about the employees, their job there too.
All right.
Okay?
Councillor Wershagen and Councillor Croc's finger was up left.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to point out that I definitely agree with what Councillor Wires has said in regards to trying to balance the tax burden. The situation, like I tried to allude to there, in regards to balancing that tax burden more effectively between the different classes. If major industry, that being both Roxel and Interfor, were both not on 5-year exemptions on their improvements, which already, is Roxel off theirs already for their tower?
It's not on their revitalization tax bylaw.
They were on it up until very, very recently. For these improvements on the smokestack. They're on it last time they came to us.
They may have been before I got here in 2012.
Before you got here.
I don't think they-
last term they came forward to do with their improvements on their air quality. Either way, what I'm saying is if everybody was, if they were currently, let's say for we'll say Interfor then, just to be safe. If Interfor was paying their full portion of taxes, then I could agree with taking that 2% off or adjusting it differently. However, being that they've already got that exemption off their 20 million in improvements or whatever the case may be that number is, it's just more on top of more and more burden on the residential taxpayer.
Councillor Crog and Councillor Wires.
Yeah, similar to, or not similar, but I do agree with some of the remarks made by the other councillors. What I was wondering is from 2012 to 2013, did the industrial mill rate go up, down, or stay the same?
I can look at that and,
Because I thought, along with Councillor Wires, that we were looking at doing it, so did it actually go down? I thought it did, but
Commercial division.
Yeah, I think we
Through the chair to our CFO.
I've just sent one of the girls up to grab the 2012 rates for
Okay.
us, so it'll be
Alright.
down pretty shortly here.
Can we answer that one as we go
Yes,
along then, and
yes.
we'll get to Councillor Wires?
Well, I also want to remind everyone that I believe we're constructing a sign or placing a sign in our community, open for business. And I think that would be a very strong message that, our rate for industry that we are working at lowering or balancing out the tax burden. But to have an increase this year to them would send a different message to anybody looking at it. That's what will be picked up. It won't be the fact that we're open for business, it's the fact that our industrial rate went up.
Even though the actual amount of money would be minimal, it's still a message part of it?
Yes,
And
it's
so,
the messaging.
All right, and clear, can we get back then to the question?
all about communication.
Did you get the information?
She should be
No.
coming down pretty quick.
I have a
Councillor Crog?
follow-up. And I agree with that as well, but I have to balance it with, we're open for business, but there's not a lot of major industries looking to relocate, especially Class 6. Where we'll see an increase to our economy is through small business and light industry. So by dropping that, it puts that extra weight on the other two.
The motion on the floor does put more weight on light industry and residential and commercial.
No, it's the other way around.
No,
It's the other way around.
it takes it off.
It puts it on heavy industry, not the others.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, okay, that's what I meant. Okay, further.
Point of order, do we have a motion on the floor then?
We do, but we're waiting for some information
Yeah.
that Roxanne's getting from upstairs.
Sure, if you could, that would be great.
Oh my God.
Any further discussion on this matter? It seems like we're dealing with a very philosophical issue because there's not a whole lot of money involved in it, right? But it's, and Councillor Wyer's point is that it's the message. I'm really torn here, I have to tell you.
I was for too.
I certainly, this is not an easy decision. I voted against the last motion, but only because I felt we needed to get a better discussion of the whole issue. Councillor Wershagen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And you're absolutely right. It is a small number, that 33,000 that we shifted. However, to the residential tax base, that is quite a bit. That's a big increase to a major industry that could write that increase off. That is nominal, absolutely nothing. And the fact is, the amount of land that is zone major industry within this town is minimal. There's not exactly room for expansion. So like Councillor Krog's point is because the land itself isn't going to grow. The land exists as it is, and without much more space, it's going to stay the same unless one of these industries closes down. So it's not like we don't have the space for another major industry to come in here because we only have certain.
Right.
There's only a limited amount.
That's exactly.
Councillor Krog's point is the message we want to send is to commercial and small industry, light industry, not to other major industry, although it's unfortunately part of what we are going to message.
It will be a message, yeah.
Yeah.
I hear footprints.
Prince.
Roxanne, she's here. I'm sorry. My attention is on the
I was bit by a radioactive spider, so I can hear the footprints.
Spider-Man,
13's on top, 12 is underneath.
see if you get your question answered.
Thank you.
Give her a
Okay,
second.
so the major industry rate for 2012 was 37.8947.
8-9.
So it had gone down.
In 2013, it increased to 42.4043. Option
One would make it
would-
43.
Yeah, and option 2 would make it 41.
41.
So it would go down?
A little bit, yeah.
So even with that, it would still reduce it by 1 point?
It would reduce it slightly with option 2, yes,
Option 2 would reduce it. Option
Yeah.
1 would make it,
would increase it.
Yeah.
would make it 43.
Yeah.
Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say.
Light industry, heavy industry.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was, yeah. I think last year, and maybe our CFO can enlighten us, but I think we did make a concerted effort to move some of the tax burden from commercial, like, to other segments of the tax base, because that was a big concern of council's last year,
Yes, it was.
to try to make that more fair. And I agree with your comments, and I think our biggest possibility of growth in the city is probably not from another major industry, but it's going to be from commercial, small business, and
Light industry.
And I think that at the present time, if we have if we want to call it the luxury of having a couple of major industries shoulder some of that burden, I don't see that as a negative. I think that what we're suggesting is a 2% increase for everyone without singling out any specific segment of the tax base for a discount. And I don't think that sends a negative message from my point of view.
Further. So what's on the table is option 1.
And point forward, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor?
Yes, is this option 1 for first, second, and third readings, or for first reading, or just to accept option 1?
Or second and third.
Second and third.
Okay.
And, I would like to see more unanimity here. I wonder if Councillor Wyers, is there anything further you wish to say, or Councillor O'Doherty?
Well, it's not the same problem there.
Yeah. That you would prefer us to keep the weight off of heavy industry, major industry, and
Well, it's not a big weight.
but not to put it on the others in particular, but just because of the message it sends to the 2 major industries that we have.
I think it's just the messaging overall.
Right.
It's, granted, if the media is going to pick up that it is industry class 6,
Right.
and everybody understands that, but
Well, it's class 4, I think, is where discussion is.
Class 4?
Can we clarify that for these two? Class 6 or?
Class 4 is the one that would be increasing, or in option 1 would see an increase in their rate this year, and option 2. So class 4, the major industry. The commercial is business, is also known as business, the class 6.
That's class.
Right, so that would not be impacted with.
And theirs goes down.
Slight, what, between option 1 and 2, class 6 would be 9.3 in option 1 and 9.4 in option 2. So between option 1 and 2, the other classes are picking up a bit of that $37,000.
Councillor Smith?
I see the message is that we're just spreading the tax burden evenly. We're not singling anyone out. Because if you're encouraging major industry with a limited availability of that kind of land, and basically transferring that burden onto the other classes, the message I would think is that you're favoring major industry and not encouraging the other guys, right? So.
Well, and I guess I'm leaning that way since that major industry is in a major upturn. I mean, the forestry business is making a lot of money, the difference in the dollar and forest products and the American economy. Roxall at the same point too is doing very well, and although they are our friends and have done a really great job in supporting us here, I'm tending towards that, at least for this fiscal year. In the long run, I think we really have to address this problem of us having this creeping industry rate. And remember what Victor said to us back in the old days, was that, you know, we wouldn't get hung out to dry if we were able to make sure that we had at least the ability to survive without some of these major industries. So that was the overall purpose, was to be a little more less dependent on the big guy leaving town, which happened to us with Canpar. Councillor Richard.
I just want to point out, Mr. Mayor, for the two remarks that if I recall that slide that was shown by Ms. Shepherd last time, the community that Victor went to beyond Grand Forks, Roslyn, had the highest tax rate of any residential class, which was like 6.8 per 1,000. So they could survive on their own if they're going to tax their people that much. So yeah, so he did exactly what he said he was going to do to survive with a major industry.
Yeah, it was good advice at the time.
Yeah, and he took it right with him.
Okay, are we ready for the question? Any further last comments?
So can you repeat the...
We're choosing option 1 on the profile. That's what the motion does. Do you want to refer that? Do you want to check it first?
I'm just looking at it.
Tell me when you're ready.
Okay.
In the question, all those in favor? Opposed? And your votes recorded, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you. Thank you. Tough decision, and you know, it would have been nice to be unanimous, but there's good points on both sides of that argument, so very much a pragmatic move on our part. Thank you, Roxanne. Okay, and we have added question period to the agenda, and we probably should do the actual bylaw motion separate to this. Now, we made a choice of option 1, but you need the bylaw, the three reading bylaw motion. Yes, we do. So council, we need someone to resolve that council give for a second, third reading to tax bylaw number 1997.
So moved.
Councillor Rashagan and Councillor Smith.
Option 1, right?
Option 1 was the choice we made in terms of the structure of that document, but in fact what we're doing now is passing first, second, and third reading, and we would have final reading at another meeting on the 15th, I think. 12th. All those in favor? Opposed? And 2 opposition. Thank you very much. And no late items and questions from the public. Again, coming forward, can we keep it on topic to what we have met this morning to discuss? Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to your CFO, had the decision been made to accept option 2, how much of the impact to residential taxpayers would have been borne by unrealized homeowner grants?
I can get back to you on that question.
Thank you.
That
I
would
would
be-
appreciate that.
We can put it through into our budget system.
That is an important
Yeah.
part of the taxes and finance as well. And secondly, Your Worship, your meetings with, I believe, the CFO and perhaps the administrator and yourself with major industry,
Yes.
were they anticipating and did they make a good case to have the burden shifted somewhat from them to other classes of property?
You know, in fact, they didn't argue that at all. I think their concern was that because they were in a boom cycle, that we were taking this opportunity to possibly be taxing them more than what they had been taxed in the past. And we were reassuring them that that wasn't the intent of council at this point.
So this should not have a huge negative impact then on your decision, or the decision, council's decision, majority of council's decision today will not negatively affect our relations or your relations with industry?
I'd hate to give that as a statement, because I think Councillor Wire's comment is really clear. I mean, what we're dealing with here in terms of the upper management of these organizations, who won't be looking at the community as much as just the figure that they see in the balance sheet or the profit and loss statement. And so yes, it may not look like we are at this point in time backing off on what is a fairly high level of taxation. So I'm hoping we can follow this up by talking to major industry again and explaining the position council has taken on that basis to keep that good relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions?
It's kind of hard to set the camera. It's not really a question, I'm just curious. I heard discussion here about the impact on industry and will it hurt them or not during the boom cycle. A lot of people have noticed that April 1st this year it was a big joke on all of us poor people or small working people. Everything's going up. Like cost of mailing letter went up 33%, like that. Gas is going up, everything's going up an awful lot, and we're seeing that in the future electrical rates are going to be going through the roof a couple of years down the road. I didn't hear any discussion in here about the impact of this on the people who aren't heavy industry or in a boom cycle, the people like, let's say, some of us who are fixed income. And like I've heard over the years, one of the schizophrenic ideas of what to do with this community is to posit it as a place for retirement, but that's fixed income. I'm just curious what this decision you've made here has on those people.
Well, and the answer to that, I think, could be answered by the councillors who spoke to it today. They certainly supported this, not because it's a lot of money, but because it, again, keeps the burden in this community shared equally with heavy industry, rather than trying to move more from heavy industry to the classifications of residential, light industry, to give that message that we are sensitive to the cost of living in this town by people and small business. I hope that large industry will understand the dilemma we faced here at the table today, and I'm sure that Mr. Allen and myself will take that message out to them, that we're really trying to put together a healthy community for them, and at this point in time people are suffering in town with the cost of living. Councillor Crock.
Yeah, just like we talked about, the workers at the industries and what would happen if industries disappear or become overtaxed, that type of thing. Keeping in mind that the workers, most of them are residents. So, you know, if we don't put it there, then we have to put it on top of the 2% that goes to them and their families. So.
Okay, motion to adjourn. So moved.
Thank you.